Zelda's 40th anniversary is rapidly approaching, and we just got ourselves Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment to kind of celebrate the very beginning of this anniversary. The problem is Aonuma, the producer of the Legend of Zelda series, and Fujibayashi both were in an interview with 4Gamer, a Japanese outlet that tends to somehow get these interviews every single time something interesting is happening. They got these two to sit down with the team at Koizumi and talk a little bit about the development process of Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment. Well, Aonuma can never just leave it at that, right? These two can never just leave it at that. They always have to sprinkle in some form of information about what's coming next, what we can expect. And boy, oh boy, do I have some interesting stuff for you. Let's talk about the brand new information that was just translated to English today, December 28th, as of this recording. This is probably the first time you are hearing this because it was the first time I saw and heard of this. Part of the interview was covering a lot about the sages, the 4 sages in Age of Imprisonment, focusing on their storylines, how they are characters in these worlds, just talking about everything with those 4. And what they did was fascinating here. Now, before I get into my opinions on it, let's just read the quote. In Tears of the Kingdom, there was a central theme running through the main story, and the sages are depicted with their faces hidden by masks and without names. If we had shown their personalities and faces, the story would have naturally grown too much. So there were many things we intentionally held back. That's why I'm truly happy that the sages have been more carefully picked up here in the Imprisoning War. That quote is just, to me, everything that is wrong with modern-day Zelda in terms of its narrative. This is ridiculous to me. The idea that they are trying to hide these characters, like make them essentially not exist. They want them to be there because, of course, they had to be for the storyline to work, but they didn't want to go into them at all. And that's why every single sage cutscene was the way that it was like 5 seconds of them repeating the exact same information over and over and over and over again. Those 4 said the same things to you, Link, the main player in Tears of the Kingdom, every single time. They just told you about the Imprisoning War, and then they gave you like a second of dialogue in terms of their own personal interactions with Ganondorf and what happened with them. It's ridiculous. It was ridiculous. That was the worst part of Tears of the Kingdom, was the narrative. The narrative was not that good. It's just a bad look, in my opinion, to be hiding, essentially, these characters from us, to put them in masks. That's the only reason those masks exist in the first place, is because they didn't want to give them too much personality. They didn't want to give them anything that would make you want more, because they knew they weren't going to give you more in that game. They knew that wasn't the point. And that is just a ridiculous idea, in my opinion, to say that you had no time to flesh out these characters, that you just decided not to go into their backstories in the main game to tell us why we should care about them in the game itself, rather than making a whole other game to go into that story. I just thought it was ridiculous. And that's one of Age of Imprisonment's best parts of that game, is that they do go into that backstory. Those characters, those sages, like, they are genuinely cool. I love getting to know all of them, and that's a big part of that game. Kia, the Zora sage, is so fascinating to me because, a little bit of spoilers technically, her dad, the king of the Zora, died to the construct, the evil, malice-filled construct, gloom-filled construct that killed her father. She then has to take over for his spot. Like, she is definitely not ready yet. She's too young. She's very ambitious, almost very angsty. She is just such a ball of emotions, and yet she has to step up. She has to be the queen that the Zora needs, because her dad died, and literally this construct has killed her dad. That is such a powerful backstory, and just seeing her interact with the Knight construct and Link and whatever the heck is going on with that Master Sword fragment inside of the construct, it's so fascinating to see her dynamic, because she cannot stand the idea of this technology, but she has to grapple with the idea of coming to terms with the construct not being bad just because it is simply a construct. Because the construct obviously brings back horrible memories of her father, who she probably watched die right in front of her very eyes, and then had to take over and all that. But it's such a good juxtaposition between the Zora in what we saw in Breath of the Wild, with Mipha and Sidon being these charismatic and in control and just like very personable, just great people. And then all of a sudden we have Kia from way, way long ago, and she doesn't know what she's doing. She is a ball of emotion. She will spit out whatever she wants. She'll hit you if she wants. Like, she is going to jump in, cutting everyone up with her little spear, and she's gonna go guns blazing. And that is not at all what we have seen from hardly any Zora in the series. And that's just one of the sages. I mean, we have so many different ones to choose from here that are so interesting. We have the Goron sage, who is just very wise, and that is not something that you would normally see from the Goron type of people, but they are just a wise leader. Like, he is such an incredible leader. He will go out there and he will do what he needs to do, but he will also take a step back and say, no, there is a time to fight, and there's a time to talk, and there's a time to plan, plan, and there's a time to replan our plan, because maybe that first one isn't going to work. And so there is so many good scenes here with especially these sages where we can really flesh out their characters a little bit more. It's fascinating. It makes me want more. It makes me want an individual game where I am learning more about these sages in that time. Zelda side characters have always been a huge part of the series. The intrigue, the mystery, just having all of these other characters outside of Zelda, outside of Link, outside of Ganondorf, and just telling their stories, seeing how these reincarnations of these three characters impact the lives of the people in that time period, in that era. And I just love the idea of getting to know these characters more. Apparently, the 3D Zelda team, Fujibayashi and Aonuma, don't believe that is the case. Don't believe that's the same thing. Now, obviously in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, there are NPCs, there are characters that are worth your time, that are incredibly deep and are fun to interact with and learn their backstories, and some of them are very tragic, which is a good world building system. But the problem is they don't seem to think that that is the main point. They don't seem to think that that matters, and that frustrates the heck out of me, because can you imagine if Tears of the Kingdom had gone into depth on these sages to begin with? If all of this backstory was shown in Tears of the Kingdom. I love that game. It has probably the best gameplay in the series in my opinion. It just evolved everything from Breath of the Wild and made it way better, but the narrative left so much to be desired. Even the champions in Breath of the Wild like just totally upstaged everything about the sages in Tears of the Kingdom. Now here we see Age of Imprisonment kind of retroactively trying to fix it, but it was too late. Too late, too little too late. Like, I am still invested in these characters, sure. Age of Imprisonment is still great, but I've seen so many people say that this game was not worth it. They just didn't enjoy it. They didn't enjoy going back to a story that should have been told 3 years ago. I could go on all day about that, how the narrative stuff is a big problem, what they're going to do with the series moving forward, but Aonuma dropped another really, really big piece of information for the future of Zelda, and I think it has a lot to tell us, so let's read that quote. In September 2023, Nintendo said it had no plans to release DLC for The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and was instead moving on to a brand new game in the series. However, Aonuma failed to rule out a return to the Hyrule of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, potentially setting up a third game. In the first place, the reason I decided to make this a sequel to the previous work was because I thought there was value in experiencing a new game in that Hyrule place, Aonuma said. If that's the case, if a new reason arises, we might return to the same world again, whether it's a sequel or a new work. I think it's going to be a completely new game, so I hope you're looking forward to it. Oh boy. So basically, Aonuma is saying that there is potential for this world to be revisited, that there is a chance that the wild era of Zelda is not finished. I don't understand why he would say that, first of all, because he knows, he has to know how much we talk about it, how much people like me come online and are just suckers for quotes like this. He has to realize that this means something. And so if he's going to say it, it's going to have to be real. It's going to have to be a consideration, something that he's just not saying flippantly. Now, maybe there is a chance, there is a small chance here that I think Aonuma is potentially just trying to tell us we're not going to rule out any possibility. And yeah, that makes sense. Like, you should never go to the public, especially if people love the Wild era as much as they do. And like, we really do, right? It sold so absurdly well. Over 50 million copies sold of Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild combined. This world has been explored and explored and explored by over 50 million people. Of course, it is going to be something that they don't want to shut the door on and make those people feel like, oh, well, we're never coming back to that now. We're just moving on. What the heck? So I get it. You don't want to just totally shut them out. But at the same time, you gotta move on. In my opinion, you have to move on. It's been over 10 years since we got the initial teaser trailer for Breath of the Wild, that cinematic back in 2014 when Aonuma showed off the world and he showed off a little painting and it looked so gorgeous. He said this is something that you can expect to see in the world itself. You can go through this world, it's interconnected. He showed us Link on a horseback with that ancient arrow shooting the Guardian in the eye. Like, it was such a great teaser. 2 years later, we found out it was going to be coming to the Wii U and the Nintendo Switch, or at the time, the Nintendo NX. We knew it was going to be a launch title for the Switch a year later. Came out, was delayed, 2017. Then we got Age of Calamity in 2020. It told us more about that backstory of the war leading up to the Calamity. Boom. You get Tears of the Kingdom in 2023. Now, Age of Imprisonment in 2025. We have so much content in this era in this style of game. And you know what? To be honest with you, I don't even think they should do that. Like, even if they were to just decide to go back to the drawing board and say, we need to do one more game, what story is left to be told? What is the reason we're coming back to this other than it being the most popular era of Zelda? There's no reason. We need to move forward. We need to move on. This is one of the things I see the Zelda community so excited about and just ready to see the future of Zelda. The future is a big topic of discussion right now, and I don't think anyone really cares about Breath of the Wild's era. I think it's time for us to move on. Like, yes, there are going to be people who, even like me, who love those games so much, will die on the hill of saying Age of Imprisonment was a great idea, is still a great game, is worth buying, worth going through, but there are going to be people who even go a step further and say there should be another game, there should be a totally different experience in this world once again. And I'm telling you right now, there will be problems with the Nintendo, the Zelda community, of all the communities within this entire big sphere of Nintendo. There will be a problem if the next mainline Zelda game is once again in this world. I don't understand why you would do that. I don't understand why anyone would ever hint at that, even if it's not going to be true. It's just upsetting because it should be something that they don't move on from. Because the problem is, Breath of the Wild, you had Calamity Ganon, and then in Tears of the Kingdom, you had Ganondorf himself being resurrected. This is a problem. Like, he's gone now. There is no evil in this world left to quench. There is nothing wrong with this world. The only thing that could happen in this world again is if something happens interpersonally, if there's some sort of civil war. I'm not gonna lie to you, that sounds cool. But at the same time, we cannot, and I mean cannot, explore this world a third time. It's not going to work. It just won't. Tears of the Kingdom barely worked for a lot of people. It worked for me. It totally worked. It was an amazing game, an amazing experience on every level. Probably my favorite game ever made, and probably one of the best ever made. But still, you cannot go back to this world a third time and expect people to bite the same way. They won't. It's been too long. We need something new, a new world, a new incarnation of all these characters to start from scratch and just move forward. So speaking of moving forward, what in the world is going to come next? What is Aonuma got going on in his brain? What is Fujibayashi going to think of next? Well, we got another glimpse in this article. Aonuma even suggests that this fruitful collaboration might influence the next mainline Zelda title. He says, the inspiration we received from this collaboration with Koei Tecmo may be reflected in the next Zelda we create. Please picture this while playing Age of Imprisonment and look forward to our Zelda. Aonuma and the team were talking earlier on in this interview about how they wanted to be the first to produce a Zelda game on the Switch 2, but Koei Tecmo, obviously, they were developing this game for the Switch 1, and then it ended up being moved to the Switch 2 to make better use of that hardware and just for the game to run a lot better. So glad they did that, by the way. I will have a review saying why I believe that coming soon, but still, I'm really glad that they moved forward. Aonuma will not be the first to have a Zelda on this console, but for him to even say that suggests to some people that that means they are further along in production than you might think. If you say that Tears of the Kingdom ended in 2023, no DLC, and they just got to work immediately on the next game, that means 2026 is the third full year of production for a brand new 3D Zelda. Some might even say that is the perfect amount of time for you to be able to give us a teaser trailer, for you to reveal it to us and say, this is what we're working on and this is what it looks like, here's the vision, coming in 2027. I'm going to push back on that idea a little bit, and I'm going to reference this quote here one more time. He says that the inspiration we received from this collaboration may be reflected in the next Zelda. Picture it while playing Age of Imprisonment, look forward to our Zelda. In my opinion, when you're talking about inspiration, and of course we're nitpicking here and the words are all we have to go off of, so that's what I gotta do, I gotta nitpick. To me, the word inspiration implies that they have not yet decided on any sort of concrete decision for what this game is going to look like moving forward. Now, of course, they obviously know what that ground is going to look like, what that foundation is for the next Zelda. I'm sure they decided that, but at the same time, if we're talking about what it is going to be built on, like if we have that foundation and then we're looking for some pillars here, I don't think they've fully decided on what those pillars are going to be in terms of the gameplay, in terms of the narrative. And so for Age of Imprisonment and Koei Tecmo and those teams to have been working so well together, which from this interview sounds like they've been working toe and toe and that it's just such a great time for them both, I really do think that inspiration implies that they are still working on some core aspects of the next Zelda, which means we're years away from seeing it and years away from playing it. If you're thinking about inspiration, then you're still thinking about what you're going to do. And if you are late in development, if you are like almost done with the game or at least halfway through, 3/4 of the way, you're probably not taking in any more inspiration for the core of your game. So what is it that he could be talking here? What is some of this inspiration that Aonuma might potentially be speaking of? I think honestly, a big part of Age of Imprisonment was the sync strikes. I broke down every single Age of Imprisonment trailer, as you probably know if you're watching this video, because those videos did very well, thank you for that. But Age of Imprisonment, I really know that they focused in on the tandem aspect of that game. They focused in on the social aspect with these characters coming together. And with games like It Takes Two, and of course Split Fiction, and then more and more of that genre being popularized, I wonder, and I know this has been something we've talked about for literally generations at this point, but I can't help but wonder if co-op might be a big portion of this next game if we get a Zelda and Link side-by-side game. It could even be something like a Little Nightmare style where you have yourself a little partner, and even like back in Wind Waker when you were going through some of those temples with Marak, I believe was his name, the Korok, and then a Rito lady that she was with you. You could have a partner like that in terms of Zelda. Maybe they're just focusing in more on the narrative because of course Age of Imprisonment has a very narrative driven story. It is basically you go into the game, you play the game a little bit, you do that warrior style of gameplay, and then you watch a cutscene. Rinse and repeat. That's pretty much the entire game. So maybe they're deciding to dial in that narrative even more. Potentially what they were talking about with the sages, they were so excited about those sages. Maybe they decided that yes, Tears of the Kingdom was what it was. We didn't want to balloon that story too much like they said, but maybe moving forward, they do want to balloon the story in their opinion. If they want to add in more characters, maybe they want to make that version of the sages even more prevalent in the next 3D entry. And that would be really cool as well. This era of Zelda has been very much about creativity, about doing whatever you want, wherever you want, however you want. That's been very much the entire Nintendo Switch and Breath of the Wild theme. Like, you just do whatever you want wherever. And I think in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, it got even more creative and gave you even more tools to work with this world, to make that world your own, especially in Tears of the Kingdom with the Zonai devices. And in Age of Imprisonment, what did they do? They incorporated a lot of those Zonai devices to where you were able to attack and efficiently defeat enemies. Now, of course, that warrior style of gameplay is very quick, and so if you were going to implement any sort of thing like that into a next 3D Zelda, it's going to have to be a lot slower, like in Tears of the Kingdom. But I do think there is a possibility that incorporating those types of things in combat in the next game, or even something with the world building itself to basically build on top of what the Zonai devices offered, something to be into the actual mechanics of the game itself, built into the core of the foundation, having yourself some more creativity, having yourself more things to build with. The Zonai devices could be something else that they're intriguing on. Zelda's 40th anniversary, I'm sure, is going to have at least a couple re-releases, some new stuff for us to interact with, some more console hardware stuff. Maybe we get some new Joy-Con 2 for the first time, some customizable stuff like that, new amiibo. Hopefully we get to see something in the next 3D Zelda. I really don't want it to be that if it's going to be years away, but if we do see it, I'm not going to complain, right? And then of course I've got my Zelda green on here, so I really hope that we see Link in his traditional green garb once more. We truly have no idea what the future looks like, and that is probably the most excited anyone has been for a Zelda in a long, long time. Since Breath of the Wild's first teaser trailer, we have no clue what is coming, and that, man, it's scary in some ways because you don't know what's going to happen, especially after some of those interviews in the past with Aonuma basically saying Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are the blueprints moving forward. That's what these games are going to be. But at the same time, it's exciting, right? So you don't know if you're going to get something you don't really want or if you're going to get the exact thing you want. At this point, hoping is true. At this point, whatever you hope for could be that. It could genuinely be whatever you think it is. I am so excited to see what you all have to think about this, and just tell me all your thoughts down below. So please leave many comments to let me know what your thoughts are. Make sure you also like and subscribe this video if you have not already. Click that notification bell to know exactly when my videos release. Click on the left side of your screen to see my wishlist video covering 2026 for Nintendo, and the right side of your screen to see my rankings video of every single game that released for Nintendo in 2025. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. Make sure you have yourself a phenomenal day. This has been Ray's Nintendo Talk. I have been Ray, and I will see you all in the next video.